Karen demands my dog be put down because he looks scary. This happened in the late 90s when I was 9 years old. To give a bit of context so this makes sense, when I was younger, my mother rescued and rehomed animals as well as breeding for profit. One of the dogs we rescued was a pregnant Great Dane cross bull mastiff who delivered about 5 puppies not long after we rescued her. What we didn't expect was parvo, a highly contagious virus that affects dogs and has a very high mortality rate. I can't remember if the mother had parvo or if the puppies caught it after they were born, but out of all the puppies, only one survived, a boy that we named Tiger. Anyone familiar with the temperament of a Great Dane will understand what sort of dog Tiger was. To call him a gentle giant is an understatement. He had the height of a Great Dane, standing at 28 inches tall, with the shoulders, girth, and weight of a bull mastiff with dark brown stripes all over him. To be totally honest, he looked terrifying, but would sooner lick you to death than he would growl or even bark at you. I was 9 when we moved to the town that this took place in, a small town with a church on every corner and a population of 2,000 narrow-minded people. We were a family of 4 with our entourage of animals. Needless to say, we didn't fit in and stood out like a sore thumb. A few days after moving there, I decided to take Tiger for a walk and have a look around the town. Tiger could be walked with a lead, but as this was a new environment for both of us, it was safer to put him on a lead. We lived just out of town along a highway, so it was about a 10-minute walk to town, and after a 5-minute walk up a hill, there's a turnoff to a long stretch of road that leads into town. I was halfway down the road when I heard someone shout, "Hey, you! What do you think you're doing with that dog?" There were only 4 or 5 houses along the road with no traffic, so there was nobody else this person could have been yelling at. I looked around and saw a woman out the front of her house walking towards me. Let's call her Karen. She screams again, louder this time. "You deaf?" I said, "What do you think you're doing with that dog?" I calmly replied to her and said I was just walking my dog. She replies in an aggressive tone, "He's dangerous. You better keep that mud away from me and my family if you know what's good for you." I said okay and continued walking. She muttered something as I walked away, but I have no clue what it was. I didn't see her on my walk back home, but we crossed paths about a week later. Only this time, she was in her car and Tiger wasn't on a lead. I took the same path as the week before, only this time I was closer to town than our first encounter. I heard a car coming up behind me, so I went to the side and told Tiger to follow. We were walking on the side of the road as Karen came up beside us, rolled down her window and screamed, "Put that dirty mud on the lead right now or I'm calling the police." I let her know that he's fine to be off leash and he's not dangerous. She wasn't having any of it and said that because he is scaring her kids, he's not fine. I've never actually seen her kids as she is the only one in the car, so I'm not really sure if she even has any. I kept my cool and tried to calm her down by showing her he is a good dog who listens. I told Tiger to sit and of course, he listened instantly. But do you think this helped to settle the wild Karen? Of course not. You better get that dog put down before he kills someone. He's scaring my children. That's where I had enough and snapped, telling her that her kids aren't even in the car before walking off. I continued walking to town in the hope that Karen would leave me alone, but the lunatic followed along beside us for most of the way to town until I somehow managed to lose her by turning into a small side street. I didn't have a mobile phone, so I stopped at a shop to use their phone to call my mom to come get me. The only way home was the road that her house was on, and I certainly didn't want another encounter with her again. I would have been livid if someone had said that to me. You handled it well though. I know you didn't want to cause a scene, but that lady just kept getting worse and worse. It's like she wanted to make your life as difficult as possible. You did great by staying calm and not giving into her bait. She has no reason to call you out the way she did. It's fine for her to be intimidated by the way your dog looks, but that doesn't mean you can't walk him or that he should be put down. You know that you have trained Tiger to be safe and not harm anyone, so until that is proven otherwise, you have every right to keep walking him. No, ma'am, your kid can't stab my dog. I have a German Shepherd named Deuce. I got him as a gift when I was 21, 26 now, and he's the nicest dog you'll ever meet. He's nice around other dogs. I've never seen him bite anyone, and he loves kids. At the time, I was fresh out of college and recently got a job at a tech company. I moved out into my current neighborhood that was not only close, but had ample backyard space since Deuce loves to run. I found a house and moved there. After about a month after moving in, I saw one of my neighbors outside, a nice older fellow we'll call Hank. I approached Hank and struck up some friendly small talk before telling him about Deuce. His face immediately became worried and he said, "You might want to keep him inside. Karen hates dogs." I asked who that was and he pointed to the house on the other side of mine and explained that she absolutely despises dogs and once called the police on a man walking his dogs, accusing it of intentionally pooping on their lawn. I, of course, decided to laugh this off, said goodbye to Hank and went back inside to check on Deuce. Fast forward a week, and I let Deuce outside in the backyard to run, watching him to make sure he didn't try to climb over the fences. I then see a kid approach Deuce from the other side of the gate. We'll call him Goblin. So Goblin called over to Deuce saying, "Doggy, doggy," and I thought it was cute, so I went over to say hello, when I realized he had a wooden stake in his hand. He then slashed at my dog with it when he got close enough, but since he's a kid, his stubby arms couldn't reach Deuce through the fence before I called him back. I then went over and asked him what he was doing. Note, I wasn't even yelling, I just raised my voice a bit. The kid, having realized he had been caught, threw the stake near his shed and ran back inside. I didn't think much of it and let Deuce back inside to double check to make sure he was alright. That's when I heard a knock at my door. I opened, and of course, there was Karen with her little goblin behind her. She asked if I was the one who yelled at her kid. I took a deep breath and said, I didn't yell at him, but I did raise my voice to hit. She cut me off saying, "How dare you yell at my baby?" I then tried to explain, letting her know her baby tried stabbing my dog. She looked over my shoulder and saw Deuce laying on the couch. "No, he didn't. My little gremlin would do no such thing. Besides, even if he did, your dog probably had it coming." This is when I started to lose my cool a bit and simply said, "What?" She then went into a rant about how that type of dog is dangerous and how people like me are the reason people get mauled by dogs. I simply just ignored her and said bye before closing the door in her face and giving Deuce a treat. About an hour later, there's another knock at my door. I roll my eyes thinking it's Karen again, but I'm surprised when it's the police. I open the door and say, "How can I help you, officer?" I see Karen standing behind them with a shit-eating grin on her face. The first officer lets me know they got a report that my dog attacked this child. I calmly let him know that the child attempted to stab my dog. The second officer then asked me if I could back my statement up, and I told them if they look near Karen's back shed, they will find the wooden stake. The officers checked and found the stake, but for some reason still weren't 100% convinced and asked to see my dog. I called out Deuce and he comes running out, excited to meet the new people. I gave him some commands and he gladly did them in front of the cops. See? He's a very obedient dog. He would never hurt a kid. I then from behind me hear, "It's true." I turned to see Hank. He had been out mowing his backyard and saw the entire thing. Hank told the officers he saw it with his own eyes and the kid had something in his hand and he tried using it on the dog. The cops then asked Karen for her side of the story and she makes up some obviously fake lie about how I should be arrested for child endangerment. The cops look at each other, turn to me, apologized, turned to Karen, and gave her a fine for lying to the police and wasting their time. Karen was in disbelief that her story that she threw together in 5 seconds didn't work. For the next week or so, anytime I would let Deuce out, I would watch him very closely. I got a few dirty looks from Karen and an email from her saying she was going to sue me for child endangerment and emotional distress, but nothing ever came out of it. Me and Hank still talk about this event and laugh at it to this day. It must have been so stressful to see that little kid try to attack your dog. I thought it would be common knowledge to everyone that this is not okay to do, but clearly, he hasn't been raised in the best way. I'm glad you got the best of that lady, and I hope she's now done bothering you. She certainly won't be calling the cops anytime soon after the fine she received. Fortunately, not all your neighbors are jerks like Karen. Hank seems like a legend, and it's really lucky that he was able to see the whole incident go down, or who knows what the police would have decided to do. EM calls the police on my dog. I have several rescued Dobermans, but the two needed for this story are Queen, who is severely abused and is now aggressive and super anxious, and Duke, my service dog for PTSD, and a variety of other mental problems. So, because Queen is significantly over-aggressive, whenever she goes outside, she has to wear a muzzle and is leashed to me just to make sure she doesn't bolt, to monitor her mental state, and to give lots of love and treats when she focuses on me and not people walking past my house. Helping her has honestly helped me a lot, and Duke is also fairly protective of us both. In a service dog way, he does body blocking, where he puts himself between us and whatever is making us upset. Because of this, we often get stares and whispers sometimes, but most people in my neighborhood know about Queen by now, except entitled mother and her nice kid. So the kid is walking home from school and reaches his hand through the chain link fence holes to pet some of my other dogs. Because he is trespassing, Queen automatically gets aggressive and tries to lunge. Thankfully, she's a smaller Doberman and I'm able to stop her, and just quickly wave before bringing her inside. I come back outside and say hi, as well as apologizing for the dog, letting them know that she was just scared. The kid nods and asked about why she was scared, so I explained that her old owners were really mean and scary. I said, it's like when you watch a scary movie and are scared even after the movie ends. She's just trying to calm down, but it's taking her a while. I grab one of my dogs who is good with kids and bring him out to be petted by the kid, and we talk a bit on how to properly approach dogs and to not stick our hands through other people's fences. He leaves, and I think we're done, so I bring my dogs inside, give Queen her anti-anxiety medication before one more potty break before bed. While I'm outside, the kid is standing a bit away while his entitled mother is leaning against my fence fence and calling out, "Hey, hey you!" Because Queen was doing pretty good and seemed fairly unbothered, I walked closer, but left several feet between me and the fence, before giving a treat to Queen and asking what she needed. Entitled mother claimed that her son had told her that I'm abusing my dog whilst pointing to Queen. The nice kid stopped her and said that it was someone else who abused her and she's still scared. Entitled mother just waved her hand at him and continued yelling, "You need to give her to me, and the rest of your dogs before I call the police on you for animal abuse." I told her I'm sorry, but there's no way in hell I would give my dogs up, and assuming she was bluffing, I let her know she could call the police if she likes. This is when entitled mother starts screaming, which is a big trigger for both me and Queen. Queen doesn't lunge, since nobody had come onto her territory yet, but she did start to press against my leg, and was shaking so hard that I could see it. This is what she does before a breakdown, as I call them, where she basically goes blind and will attack anyone, including me and my other dogs. She hadn't had one in over a year, though, so I didn't take much notice. Thankfully, Duke did. Entitled mother kept screaming while Duke body blocked us both, and was trying to lean against Queen for some pressure therapy, and keeping his eyes on the mother as he was trained to do this so I could feel safe enough to take my eyes off of other people. But it can be unnerving. I understand that. Entitled mother apparently thought this was an attack stance and whipped out her phone and called 911, saying something along the lines of an aggressive dog was attacking her and her son. I sent my dogs, who actually listened, inside, while I stayed put, afraid that entitled mother would climb my fence. Queen was still heavily shaking, and when I crouched down and tried to pet her to calm her down, she snapped at me. I stumbled back, landed on my butt, and Queen had her hackles raised, looking blankly ahead. I tried to talk to her calmly and softly, but entitled mother is still screaming to the police, now about how I'm being attacked and to hurry. The rest was a mess. The police arrived, and I basically had to cover Queen while she struggled and smashed her muzzle into me, trying to bite me to make sure they wouldn't do anything while I also cried, which freaked Duke out as he ran around us in circles trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, the police told me to bring my dogs inside and to come out and talk. Duke refused to leave my side, so I put his harness on and we both went inside. I was able to produce Queen's papers and even called my vet for proof that she is a scared dog, not an aggressive dog, and my vet even explained some of her treatment plan to them all. By the end of it, myself, Queen, and I'm pretty sure Duke as well, were all so emotionally drained. We just went to bed and I called in late for work the next day. Several of my neighbors have told me they gave their own statements to the police about my dogs and Queen, and thankfully we have a few security cameras that can sort of view my yard, and the police have since dropped the case. I saw the nice kid again today, which is why I thought of this story. He slid a note under my fence that said sorry with a few drawings of my dogs and me. It was very cute and sweet. I hope he is okay though. He looked really scared when I more or less flung myself over Queen while she had a breakdown. That's a very intense situation, and I'm sorry you and your dogs had to go through that. The way you have raised your dog seems brilliant, and you have my full respect for taking care of previously abused dogs and giving them a better life. What I'm most impressed with is how turned on and alert Duke is. From the way you describe him, he seems way too smart to be a dog, and that is all down to the way you have raised them. As for the entitled mother in this situation, I think you did the right thing by not pressing charges or trying to get her in trouble. In situations like this, revenge should be the last thing on your mind, and for you, I can tell all you care about is you and your dog's safety. I hope she doesn't cause you any more issues, and I wish you the best of luck in life. Entitled mother touches my dog's wounds and get mad when he nips at her. So earlier this week, I was moving the cattle to a different part of the pasture when I noticed the cattle all getting a little spooked, and I didn't know right away what was wrong. But then I heard a loud yelp of pain followed by an angry snarl coming from behind me. And then I heard another yelp which was quickly cut off midway. Me as well as my two dogs Ross and Freya bolted towards the commotion. I saw 5 of my other dogs, Fenrir, Winona, Shiva, Lily, and Jagger, having just killed a group of 4 coyotes. Now, I feel I should preface by saying that coyotes are all too common where I live, and then trying to ambush a lone calf or dog isn't an uncommon occurrence here. But one of the coyotes had apparently scratched Jagger's right shoulder pretty badly, but he'd managed to kill the coyote that had torn him up. Winona had begun licking his wounds as I kneeled down to take a look at it. The scratches didn't seem to be too bad at first glance, but I wasted no time in leading Jagger to the truck and taking him straight to the vet's office. Luckily, no one was there that day, so I got right in and gave the vet the rundown on what happened. They took Jagger into a room where they patched them up and I paid them and left. Jagger spent basically all week healing and resting, and early this morning I decided I was going to take him to our local Petco and get some flea and tick supplies, as well as some treats and maybe new toys for all the dogs. Now, I don't always bring my dogs with me into pet shops, parks, etc. So as we walk in, we both garner some attention due to Jagger's size and beautiful coat, and I couldn't help but smile a bit. Quite a few people approached us to give us compliments, ask about the missing chunk of hair, the visible marks on his right side, and if they could pet my dog. I explained what happened attention to Jagger and told everyone they can just give him a pat or rub on his head. Although Jagger was still a little cranky and sore, he seemed to enjoy all the attention, but after a few minutes, I excused us from the small crowd we'd gathered so I could do what I came to do. We walked into an aisle with dog puzzle toys. I eventually find a few balls that dispense dog food by being moved around a certain way, and these rubber discs that have these ring-shaped treats for it. I grab some flea and tick stuff and go to the treat aisle. As I'm letting Jagger chew some treats, I hear a gasp and I turn to look. There's a blonde white woman who I think is in her 40s, and with her is a little girl maybe 16 who I imagine has to be the daughter. They marvel at Jagger and ask to pet him, so I tell them exactly what I'd already told everyone else before her. The little girl pets Jagger, and when the mom goes to pet him, I see her going to rub his sides. I only get to say, wait, before she rubs his still sore scratch marks a little too hard and he nips at her hand. The woman jumps back and starts loudly asking me why I'd bring my aggressive dog into a pet store and why I let her pet my dog knowing it would bite. I calmly tell her, ma'am, did it ever occur to you that this scratched up side might be sore? That's why I told you to pet his head. And he didn't bite you, nor did he even nip you. He nipped at you. That shows he didn't want to hurt you. Just get you to stop aggravating his wounds. As I'm sure you can imagine, this just gets her even more upset, and she loudly declared she was going to find someone to kick me out of the store. I just wave her off and start to grab some treats, and after roughly a minute, little Miss Karen comes back with an employee shouting that my dog had attacked her and that she wanted me thrown out. The employee, an absolute doll, stares at Jagger for a moment, then at Karen, and says, ma'am, I highly doubt that gentleman's dog attacked you. I mean, you're still standing and you're clearly not injured. I think it's safe to assume that if the dog had attacked you, you'd likely be severely injured right now. The woman, of course, tried to double down on her claims, and so the employee asked for my side of things, which I told her in full detail. By this point, many of the people who'd been loving on Jagger earlier started to gather and call out the woman, basically repeating what I'd said to them. The lady ended up just leaving after making a fool of herself, and I thanked all of the wonderful folks who'd backed me up and apologized to the employee for making a scene, but she just smiled and waved off what I said. I paid for my things, made it home, and gave the dogs their toys once we got home. I'm glad you made it home safely, and that nothing more came from the situation. That woman is just straight up stupid, or she just likes to look for problems, as it doesn't take a genius to figure out you shouldn't pet a dog on his injuries. This would obviously make any dog a little overstimulated and scared, leading them to respond by nipping at the person causing the pain. I've seen similar behavior from my dog when she's been scared or startled by something. If you've enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Check out the other videos on your screen right now, otherwise you're definitely the jerk.